All right. So for those who are just coming in, again, the goals of this workshop are to understand the wildfire hazards, what does living in a wildfire zone, WUI's wildland urban interface mean for you? How can taking action now help protect your family, your property, your neighborhood, and setting goals to protect your home? So to get started, pull out that piece of paper and a pencil, and I want you to the best of your ability, draw your property boundary and any structures on your property. So that could be your house, a garage, a detached garage, a barn, storage shed. And I won't be collecting these, so don't worry about how nice it looks. Just do your best. And as an example, here's my not so nice drawing of my home, where I have my house and the driveway and a front yard and a backyard and a retaining wall. You don't have to worry about drawing in all of the details I have here, like the rock fill or the grass or the pine tree. Don't draw any of that in just yet. You just want to put in your structures and your property boundary to the best of your ability. And I'll give you about 5 minutes to sketch that out.
I'm not sure where we're supposed to sketch this, Brittany. This is Renee O'Neill.
Hi, Renee. Just on a piece of paper in front of
Oh,
you.
okay, got it. Not here on the computer screen.
That would take a bit longer, I'm sure.
I thought I should let you know too, where we live with Wi-Fi. One, Wi-Fi can be sketchy. In fact, I just about panicked because it said I did not have a Wi-Fi connection when I first got on, ready to sign on. And then two, it takes forever to upload or download things.
Okay, good to know. Well, I am recording this session. So if for some reason you drop off or anybody has to drop off, feel free to email me, and I'm going to share a Drive folder with you with all of the materials from tonight, including the recording. So if something happens and you lose connection, you can always check it out after the fact. So. I'll give you maybe 2 more minutes to draw that out. And don't worry if it's not completely done, just do your best. So for those of you that are just coming in, make sure you're hooked up to the sound. Yes. So for those of you that are just coming in, we've all just taken out a piece of paper and we're just drawing your property boundary and any structures on your property to the best of your ability. Maybe 1 more minute to finish that up. And you can continue filling it in as we go. You'll have more time to continue this. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is a photo hunt. So go ahead and open up the chat window, because I'm going to have you write some things in the chat as we go. And the idea is to look at the photograph and in the chat, write anything that you see in this photograph that you think might cause this house to catch on fire, if there's a wildfire that's coming through, or maybe would prevent things from catching on fire if a wildfire were coming through this area. Right. So this one's a softball. We like to start with the softballs, right? So the wood pile piled up against the side of the house. So of course, you know, we use firewood for camping fires and burning fires. So that's flammable stuff. So having a pile of wood piled right up against your structure is basically kindling for any embers that are going to be blowing through your neighborhood. So some of the other things I see, so wood against the house, maybe the overhanging eaves. It depends what they're made of. It's hard to see in this photograph what these are made of, but if they're made of non-flammable material, or if the gutters up here are clean, maybe if they're covered, that wouldn't be so bad. What about let's see, the gravel? Perfect. So there, you know, underneath this wood pile, which is flammable, there's a zone of gravel. So gravel is not going to catch on fire, right? So there's some aspects of this yard that are doing pretty well in terms of the gravel, the well-maintained, low-cut grass. There doesn't seem to be anything else that's really flammable between the house and the woods, which appear to be about 30 feet away. So that's good. So the idea here with your house, with the structure that you just drew in your property boundaries, is if you have anything that looks like this in your yard, so for example, if you have a wood pile that might be piled up against your house or any other structure on your property, go ahead and draw that in and maybe mark that with like an unhappy face or a red pencil, showing that that's something that probably could influence your house or cause your house to catch on fire. And if you have things like well-maintained cut grass or gravel around your house, go ahead and draw that in with a green pencil or a happy face, saying that this is something that's good that I have in my yard. So we're going to do this for the next series of photographs. Yeah, the open door. So if there was a wildfire, we would want to close that door for sure. Closing the windows. Good. Yeah, and Tim pointed out the sealed eaves. So it does look like they're sealed, which is very good. Okay. So what about this picture? This is actually in my, well, it was in my neighborhood. What do you see other than a random baby sitting in the middle of a cul-de-sac? Yeah, so there's some dead branches in this tree. Dead foliage that acts as a fire ladder. What do you mean by that, Greg? Do you want to unmute and say what you mean by a fire ladder?
Yeah, the flames from the bottom will be able to travel all the way up the tree and the whole thing. And you're going to have a significant source of embers if there's any
yeah,
wind at all. So very dangerous situation.
Yes, yeah. This is a pretty.
They tend to get a lot of dead matter on the inside. They're very dangerous.
Yeah. So there's a couple things going on here. So first of all, I don't know how common this bush is in your neck of the woods, but this is a juniper bush that's down here at the bottom. And juniper, like many pine type of plants, is very flammable. So if you want to know if vegetation against your house or vegetation in your yard is flammable, a good rule of thumb is just if it's fragrant. So if you touch the leaves and you smell your fingers, if it smells like lavender or sage or pine, the reason you're smelling it is because it has a lot of oil in it. And that oil tends to be very flammable. And so juniper is a very flammable bush. So not only do we have a flammable bush down here, but we've got aspects of a dead tree that are extending down into that bush. So if there were an ember storm or a fire blowing through and embers blowing through and embers are landing down here in this dry bush or in the dry vegetation below it, that will ignite the bush. The bush would then ignite the tree because the tree is hanging down into the flammable bush. If it was just the juniper that caught on fire, maybe it wouldn't be so big of a deal for these houses that are a bit farther away. But as soon as that tree catches, then the houses that you see right here and the one off to the left that you don't see in the image are in a dire position. So the fire ladder is where you have material, trees and branches that are low enough to be in other flammable materials, and it could cause what's a ground fire to turn into a canopy fire. That's a very dangerous situation. So if you have anything that looks like this in your yard, you can mark that in your property map. Now it doesn't, in this case, this tree was dead. I mean, it was dying. It had to be removed, but not all trees have to be removed. If you have a pine tree in your yard or something like this, limbing it up, making sure that it's 10 feet off the ground and at least 10 feet away from your house, the limbs, is a way to keep your trees, which are valuable and important for our ecosystems, but also keep it from causing a fire ladder situation. So here's another example where there's some dead vegetation, some dead brush, some more juniper, and you've got another tree with limbs that are hanging down into the flammable material. So this is another example of a potential fire ladder. So it could look something like this. And then just the nice thing is, there's always co-benefits of taking action to clean things up. And in this case, the backyard doesn't even look that nice. It's kind of cluttered with vegetation, but cleaning some of that vegetation up, taking out some of that flammable vegetation and limbing up that tree made it look a lot nicer too. So again, reducing the chances for canopy fires is really important. Okay, sprinklers good. We'll get to sprinklers. Sprinklers are good, but in a wildfire situation, you don't want to turn them on because they'll take water away from the firefighters who need that water pressure. So we'll get to sprinklers and evacuations in a little bit here. All right, what about this situation? So we'll go ahead and put this in the chat. What about this yard makes this house either less prone to catching on fire or more prone to catching on fire? Okay, so Beth says raised deck. What about the raised deck?
It's a problem because it collects leaf litter underneath it. So the wind will blow leaf litter underneath it, really hard to clean it out. And then the embers will go underneath it, catch the leaf litter on fire, and then it's burning, a fire's burning underneath that deck, which could get hot enough to ignite the deck, which is pretty big material, not easy to ignite necessarily, embers hitting it.
Yeah, exactly. Like embers landing on a deck might not necessarily ignite it, but if there's flammable material underneath the deck, if you do have a raised deck, it is very important to keep it cleaned out. Composite roof. That's good. Yeah. So it looks like, it's hard to say in these pictures what the roof's made of, right? But you certainly can look, if you are replacing your roof, you always want to look for the Class A flame retardant roofs. The gutters, it's hard to see again in here if the gutters are covered or not, but it looks like perhaps they might not be. So that's, if you're not covering your gutters with some sort of metal gutter guard, you can have material that builds up in there. Let's see what else is coming through. What about this stuff down here? What's in the yard? Can you tell from this picture what this yard? Wood mulch. Yes, there's wooden mulch in this yard, and it appears that this wooden mulch is extending underneath the deck. Yeah. And then these, again, like thinking about flammable vegetation, do you think these are fragrant? So you have wooden mulch, and then you have vegetation that's in pretty close proximity to each other, and you've got these pines that are right up under the deck, which are very flammable. So this yard is extremely flammable, and you've got material that's going up underneath this deck and touching the deck. So the wood mulch will catch fire very easily. So that's not good to have within 5 feet of the property, and especially having it extend underneath this deck is a problem. So again, if you have wood mulch in your yard, and perhaps it's like you have some isolated flower beds that are out beyond 5 feet of your house. So if you got the first zone within 5 feet of your house, you shouldn't really have any wood mulch there. You would want to have rock mulch, if at all. And even rubber mulch can catch on fire. So if you have that wooden mulch within 5 feet of your house, you might want to go ahead and put that in your sketch as something that you might want to consider replacing. But within the zone from 5 to 30 feet of your house, if you have maybe some isolated flower beds that are farther apart and have some wood mulch in there, that I'm not so concerned with, as long as what's between the mulch is not connecting the vegetation so that it could catch on fire and spread across your yard. So between there, having gravel mulch or having well-maintained grass or something like that. I know maybe you're not, there's drought tolerant grasses, things like that as well. Yeah, it kind of does look like gravel, but it is wood mulch, Renee. Or if you have closely spaced flammable vegetation, you might want to put that in your map. Or you could draw your nice vegetation that's spaced out and put happy faces next to it, because I think what's important in all of these is recognizing that there are aspects of your yard that are probably in pretty good shape. And then there's some things that you could do to protect yourself even more. Okay, so this is a couple of deck situations here with overhanging decks. And depending on what the decks are made of, they can also be flammable. But really what's most important, perhaps most important, one could argue what's more important even, is not so much what your deck is made of, but what's under it and on top of it. Because it's pretty hard to catch a plank of wood on fire just sitting by itself. It can happen. If you have flames that are coming right up to your house, certainly that can be a problem. But if you're just having embers blowing in, maybe the fire front is about a mile away, and you're getting embers that are coming in and landing, it's much less likely that they're going to ignite big planks of wood than it is if there's flammable material sitting on that wood. And so certainly if you are replacing a deck using flammable or flame retardant materials, materials that are non-combustible is better. But replacing a deck is really expensive. And so you also have to think about, well, what can I do right now and what might I plan out to do in the future? So when my deck needs replaced, I will use non-combustible materials. There's also some really nice materials now where you can spray your deck with flame retardant or spray wood materials that lasts. You'd have to look those up to see what's available, but there are some options there. For today though, like focusing on what you can do right away to protect yourself is making sure that you don't have wood piles or flammable debris underneath of your deck. Maybe here is an example I say of better. So here you have rock mulch that's underneath the deck and all the leaves are blown out. Here, maybe a concrete or something like that that's not flammable beneath the deck, and here's some rock work. And then a best case scenario is if you can actually enclose the bottom of that deck so that it's not overhanging and you don't continually get leaves blowing in there or debris blowing in there. So if you have anything that looks like this in your house, in your structure, you could go ahead and draw that into, like maybe you have an overhanging deck, you're like, yeah, it's fall, I got some leaves that are blowing in there and I haven't cleaned them out in a while, or yeah, I did put that wood pile under there. It seemed convenient at the moment, but now that I'm thinking about it, that could really make my home more prone to catching on fire. So Beth mentioned that the coatings are not recommended by NFPA. So I'll have to look that up, because the last time I talked to our wildfire mitigation specialist here locally, he was mentioning that there are some products that if you're not able to replace your deck right away, that they can help, but it's not a better solution than non-combustible materials. Okay. And then we do have the Ventura Fire Safe Council here. Do Max or Myra want to say anything about the deck materials in particular?
No, I think you covered it quite nicely. I think Beth brought up a good point in that the effectiveness and the efficacy of the coating in the different products that are out there is kind of unproven. at certain scientific levels, but they certainly can help if there are no alternatives available.
Mhm.
I think the biggest concern with them is how long do they last?
Exactly.
Under
Exactly.
sort of our brutal sunshine.
Mhm.
It's just not clear that I've talked to a lot. There was a big mailing that went out in Topanga a couple of years ago. And by the way, I run the Fire Safe Council in Topanga. And started doing the home ignition zone evaluation program, really created it 10 years ago.
Nice.
So I've been doing this a while. A lot of people they got inundated with these mailings and they were hoping that they could, just paint their house and they'd be safe.
Right.
And it's just not the right place to spend your money, your first choice of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Yep, I agree. And one of the best things you can do is just keep what's under your deck clear and be careful of flammable furniture too. You know, a lot of times like our wicker furniture, things like that we put on our decks can be flammable and cause problems as well. Okay, so here's another photograph. So what are some issues that you might see making this house more prone to catching on fire if a wildfire blows through? You can put them in the chat. Yeah, so the wood fence is attached to the house. Not only is it a wood fence, but it's kind of a cruddy old wood fence that probably needs replaced. It's pretty flammable. Yeah, the siding here, this is actually a storage shed. So the siding is pretty flammable as well. It's just wooden planks, has some peeling paint on it as well. The vegetation, I don't know if anybody has caught the vegetation, but this vegetation is actually pretty flammable as well. It dries out in the summer. And I want to point out, honestly, in all honesty, this is my house. Well, I cleaned it up since then, but I like to show examples from my own yard because when we moved in and when I realized what kind of wildfire zone we were in, that we had to take some actions. So what we did was we cleared out that dry flammable vegetation. We put gravel in here to prevent additional vegetation from growing in, but we do still have to maintain it and pull it. And we put a little garden in there in this, what was I think a sandbox for kids. And so that really helped to protect the home. Now we haven't gotten to that fence yet. It's on our to-do list, it's on our action plan, but it's something that's a little bit more expensive and we have to save up for. And so another message and thing to think about when you're looking at protecting your home, you don't have to do it all at once. Make a plan, do the stuff that's easy, free, or cheap first to get you started, and then plan out for the things that might be more expensive, like replacing your roof or replacing a fence or replacing even a porch, right? And yeah, that's a great point, Beth. I don't actually have to replace this whole fence. I could just replace the section that's within 5 feet of the house with some metal, with a metal fencing. So that would make it a little bit more doable and less
Actually, hey,
expensive.
Brittany, for a long time, I said there's 5 feet that connects to the house. Actually, it's 5 feet from the farthest extrusion of your house. So it would be
From here.
from your house, underneath the overhang, and then the 5 feet starts.
Yeah, that's a good point. The whole thing really needs replaced, to be honest. But yeah, this
But
so
rather,
from here.
but you could wait years. That fence could last you years. All you have to do is put in that metal section right now from a fire point of view.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you, Beth. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, so if you have anything that looks like this in your yard, again, put it in your map. And just some things to note that this is a Class A roof. You can't see here, but there are metal gutter guards on the metal gutters to prevent material from collecting in there. We did remove some of that flammable vegetation, but there are still some things that we need to work on, like the siding is flammable down here, and the wood fence is flammable. Okay, moving on. Some little things. So I also had a wildfire assessment, home hardening assessment, where I had a firefighter come out and walk around my home with me. And he caught some things that I just never would have thought of that can really make your house more prone to catching on fire. Little things like peeling paint is a great place for embers to get stuck. Or in this case, again, this was that storage shed. there's just a panel that was kind of peeling away and needed to be replaced. And that is a great place for embers to get sucked up. Apparently, it's also a great place for wasp nests. So 2 reasons to probably clean that one up. And the other thing that I wouldn't have thought of without having my home hardening assessment is that our intake vents, our air vents to our house need to have a metal mesh across them. And luckily ours did, but a 1/8 inch metal mesh will keep embers from being sucked up into your air vents. If they get sucked up into your air vents, your roof is your attic's gonna catch on fire pretty easily. And so just making sure all air intake vents in your house have that metal mesh is really important. So that might be something that you don't know right now with you might after this session walk outside and say, hey, do I have metal vents up there or metal mesh? So you might just want to put a question mark next to your roof in your drawing if you don't know if you have that right now.
So Brittany, code out here is 1/4 inch. So
Okay.
answer is, unless you've done it yourself, the answer is no.
Okay. Okay. So the building code is to have 1/4 inch mesh against or behind your intake fence. That's not enough. It's not small, it's too big. Embers can get through that. So you might have to think about replacing that.
Yeah, it works for rodents. We recommend a product called Quick Mesh. It's KWIK mesh. You can get it at any big box or Amazon. It's real easy to install. Just wear gloves. You can cut it. Yeah.
Perfect. Quick mesh.
It's a real cheap, easy, quick solution.
Yeah. And that's nice.
And very, very effective.
Great. Perfect. What about this? These pictures. We can't say anything about the roofing material, but what's on the roof that could catch on fire? So go ahead and put it in the chat. Or we could just go through. Yeah, the leaf litter. I mean, this stuff will catch so fast. If you have embers that are landing in that leaf litter, it's going to go up right away. And you're going to have active flames on your house. And so here you've got leaf litter, dry debris, both in the eaves of the house, but also in the gutters. And so this is a continual process. You can't just go out there once a year and clean this out and say you're safe. This is something that I usually do on July 3rd to start. Like, oh, it's fire season. Tomorrow's July 4th. I better get the stuff off the roof because the fireworks are going to start, even though they're illegal in this area. But it's something that you want to schedule it. Maybe put it on a calendar so that you're routinely getting up on your roof or bringing somebody in to get up on your roof and make sure it's cleaned out. Yeah, dry leaf debris on the skylight as well. So that needs to be cleaned out. And does that skylight have a mesh on it to make sure that there's nothing that's making its way underneath of it? So you might want to check that as well while you're up there. So again, putting in some metal gutter guards. There's some YouTube videos that can show you how to do this. It's not that expensive if you do it yourself, or you could hire somebody to come in and do this. But this goes a long way. Not only does it protect you from having flammable stuff land in your gutters, but it also keeps your gutters from clogging up. So there's some really nice co-benefits there. Not only does your house look nicer when you take all that debris off the top, but it protects your house too. Okay, so speeding on through. So this is an example of a home that was built really thinking about being protected from wildfire. This was built in Paradise after the Paradise fire a few years ago. So Margaret asked in the chat why the wire mesh is needed for the skylight. You just, anywhere where you can have embers accumulate and get stuck is something that you would want to prevent. And so this might not be an intake valve, and I can't tell from the picture if there's a space under there, but anywhere there's a space where an ember can get stuck and stop is where you want to just try to prevent that from happening. So yeah, so in this case, you see there's wooden mulch out here in the yard. Wooden mulch is way cheaper than rock mulch, although I'm a geologist, so I love rocks. My house is full of rocks and rock mulch. But making sure here you've got a wooden fence, but that fence, as Beth pointed out, from the eaves or from the edge of the house out is metal for at least 5 feet. And then the rest is a beautiful wooden fence, privacy fence. There's gravel that extends at least 5 feet away from the house, so there's nothing combustible here. And of course, you've got your Class A roof, you've got metal gutters and metal gutter guards. So this is kind of what we're really looking for. And so perhaps you have some aspects of this already in your yards and you've got a good start. But hopefully what you've done today in looking at your maps is been able to identify probably some priority areas or some target areas that you might want to consider taking some action to reduce your risk of your house catching on fire if a wildfire comes through. And certainly, while this might help you understand your own personal risk or where places in your own yard might be more prone to catching on fire, I still encourage you to reach out and get one of these free home hardening assessments. There's no gimmick, there's no catch. They're literally just folks like Max and Myra going out to your house and walking around. It's fun. I actually really enjoyed mine and I learned a lot. They really helped me identify some priority areas and make my action list that I started to take action on. All right, so moving on to how fire works. We have 22 minutes, so we're going to keep zooming on. Sorry, dumb pun. So wildfires are a natural part of our ecosystem. We're never going to stop wildfires from happening, right? And they're a necessary part of our ecosystem too, because they really help with underbrush and forest health and things like that. And so we're never going to be able to stop wildfires from happening. The problem, though, really is when we build into the wildfire prone area. And so this is an example. We have the wildland urban interface. This is my area. So this is Boise here, where you can see this dry, flammable vegetation in the foothills and neighborhoods that are extending up into those foothills. So that's what we consider the wildland urban interface. And this is the areas that are most at risk from wildfire, the impact of wildfire. But I want to note that there are areas beyond this where you might have a neighborhood that's several streets away from, nowhere near the flammable vegetation, but it's in an ember zone. The thing is with these wildfires that it's not always the flame front that catches your house on fire. In fact, most homes ignite from wildfires because embers blow from the wildfire front into neighborhoods and catch that flammable stuff around your house on fire. That's how most most homes ignite in wildfire events. So that's why it's, again, so important to clean up your yard and keep that flammable stuff away from your house. So is Ventura County at risk to wildfire? I know, a silly question because we wouldn't be here if it weren't, right? And certainly it is. You've experienced a number of wildfires recently. But again, thinking about that ember intrusion makes your area even a little bit more prone to wildfire, to home ignitions, because you have those Santa Ana winds, right? So the conditions for a wildfire to turn into a wildfire disaster are very dry conditions. So low humidity, very hot conditions, dry conditions, high winds that can really propagate a fire quickly by blowing embers through neighborhoods. And there's also some degree of slopes, because if you have a lot of mountainous terrain, fire moves uphill a lot faster than it does across flat terrain. But really, when I'm thinking about your communities, I'm thinking about the Santa Ana winds and these embers blowing in from more than a mile away from the wildfire front and catching flammable stuff in your yards on fire. So this is a tool, wildfirerisk.org. So I'll just open this link here. Hopefully it opens. Just thinking about it. Opened on the wrong screen. So here you can, it's a nice resource for looking at wildfire hazard information. But if you go to Explore, you can type in your county or your city, Ventura County, California, and you can look at these different maps. So this one is showing risk to homes where yellow is low and red is high. You can look at wildfire likelihood. So, you know, there are some areas in your county that are more likely to have wildfire and some areas that are less likely to have wildfire. But what I really want you to see is its exposure type. So almost your entire county is exposed to the hazard of wildfire, because the orange are the areas that are indirectly exposed. So those are the areas where you have embers blowing in. And the area in red is the area that's mapped as directly exposed. And so certainly, yeah, you live in a wildfire prone landscape, but there's a lot you can do to reduce, to protect yourself, like we're talking about tonight. So this is a video created in a lab through a research center here. And I'm going to turn the sound off because you don't need to hear the sound. And I'm just going to flip through it. But this is in a lab, so it's a lab created ember storm with a full scale house. And you see embers are collecting on the screen, but the house is not igniting. The embers themselves are not igniting the siding of the house. What's igniting? Looking back, what's igniting is that wooden mulch along the base and the leaves that are in the gutters. And if you progress it even further, you see that now you have flames right up against the house. This is how most houses ignite during wildfires. It's not the front of the wildfire moving through like a tsunami. It's embers that are coming in and landing in flammable material. And that flammable material catches on fire, and now you have direct flames on your house. So in this case, if there wasn't flammable material here in the gutters, this house wouldn't have caught on fire. And so just really hitting home that that's why getting that flammable stuff away from your house is so effective. It's the best thing you can do. Oops. And so this is a video that we created. I'm going to stop sharing and start sharing again because I don't remember if I optimized for screen sharing or for sound. So, all right, here we go.
So I'm a wildfire mitigation specialist with the Boise Fire Department.
Ooh, happened.
So I'm a wildfire mitigation specialist with the Boise.
Oh, shoot. I don't know why it's stopping.
So I'm a wildfire mitigation specialist with the Boise Fire Department, and in my view.
Oh my goodness. Sorry, folks.
So I'm a wildfire mitigation specialist with the Boise Fire Department, and in my view, homeowners are really critical. They're a first line of defense. What they do matters greatly. And so if a homeowner can make their home survivable to where we don't have to feel like we have to protect that home and we can actually put out the fire sooner, that protects homeowners. It keeps the fire from growing and threatening more homes, more homeowners, and more firefighters. If we get a good wind-blown fire, you're going to have embers landing around your home up to a mile away from the fire front. And so folks that, are even several roads into a neighborhood are affected by ember intrusion and that kind of thing, right? We had the 8th Street fire, and there was one home that ended up burning, and it was because they had an arborvitae bush right up underneath a soffit vent. And so an ember landed in that arborvitae, got the arborvitae going right up underneath that soffit vent, which burned up into the attic of that house and burnt the roof off of the house. That is the only thing that caused that house to ignite, was that one single arborvitae bush that was in the wrong spot, for that home. That homeowner could have protected their home by making sure that they didn't have any flammable vegetation right up against their home, but they probably weren't aware, right? And so it's really important that homeowners gain some awareness and some understanding of those ignition vulnerabilities and what will cause problems for them during a wildfire event. We're all in this together, right? Wildfire is everyone's fight. So we're working together in a partnership. Homeowners are doing their part, hardening their home, doing proper vegetation management to where their homes can be standalone, survivable, and then wildland firefighters and firefighters in general can do their job, get the fire put out sooner, which, threatens less homes, less lives, less property.
All right. In a minute, show video. When I stopped sharing and started sharing, it changed all of my screens. So everybody was able to hear that, okay? Okay, perfect. All right, so just a fun pop quiz. What percent of wildfires do you think are human caused? And so you should see a poll up on your screen right now. I can see the numbers coming in. 22 of 44 participated. Okay. Most people have filled this out. I'm going to stop it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So sharing the results. So the majority is correct. 88%. Can you see the results on your screen? Okay. Yeah. So nationally, 88%, and this varies from location to location for sure, but nationally, 88% of wildfires are ignited by humans, from leaving campfires out, throwing cigarettes out the window, driving your car. Maybe you've been driving for a little while and you're going out into the wilderness to go camping, and you drive into some high brush, some high flammable brush. The bottom of your car can be very hot, and it can ignite that flammable material. So, do your part too to prevent wildfires by putting out your fires. And a lot of them are also caused, as we know, and in California as well, by power companies, power lines, transformers burning up or blowing up and things like that. And just to give you, this is comes from a scientific paper looking at the number of Western wildfires near homes in 2020. And here you've got the number of fires on the vertical axis of 200, 400, 600, 800, 1,000 fires. This is across the whole West. And down here, days throughout the year. And so the blue is the areas that were caused by lightning. So fires caused by lightning, number of fires caused by lightning over a year. And the red are fires caused by humans. So you obviously see there's a peak on a certain day. So I always say July 4th is the start of wildfire season, but of course it's not. And in many of in California, in Idaho, fire season is becoming year round. All right, so moving on, exploring ways to protect your neighborhood. So as the Captain Fire, Jerry McAdams pointed out, we all have to do our part. And so we've talked about maintaining the area within 5 feet of your house, making sure there's nothing flammable within 5 feet of your house is something that's very good to do on your roof, under your decks, and beyond. And then out to 30 feet, you want to make sure that anything flammable is kind of spread out and not connected, but you really want to try to prevent having anything much flammable in that zone as well. So thinking about this and looking at the map you created, I just want to give you a couple of minutes to write down some things you would like to do. So take a couple of minutes on your map and write down a few ideas for what you might want to do to, I just realized the poll's still showing, to protect your yard. And if you want, you could put in the chat some of the things that you came up with. So hopefully some of the things you're thinking of are checking those vents, making sure that you have at least 1/8 inch screening on your vents, removing that flammable material, check for that flammable vegetation, right? Like Jerry McAdams said, that arborvitae bush up against the soffit vent caused that house to catch on fire. change wood mulch out to gravel. Screening on vents, good. Maybe moving those wood piles away from structures, any structure, not just your house. You also don't want your storage shed to catch on fire because that's probably pretty close to your house. So making sure that the wood pile is moved 30 feet away from any structure on your property. Watch out for that flammable furniture on your decks. So if there is a wildfire in your area, you might just want to move it inside so it's not out and to catch on fire. Some other things to consider: you do have a fire-wise, water-wise garden that you can go visit. And I will share the slide deck so that you can have these links. But you know, you don't have to have a stark yard landscape. You can have a beautiful landscape full of beautiful flowers and things that are fire resistant and low water. So there's also drought tolerant grasses if you really want grass in your yard that don't require much water at all. Good, I'm seeing lots of good stuff coming through the chat. Getting to know your neighbors. That's one of the best things you can do. Who in your neighborhood knows first aid? Who has a chainsaw in case a tree comes down across your exit route? Just normalizing the conversation about wildfire, talking about what you've done in your yard and why. You know, you don't necessarily want to go up to your neighbors and be like, hey, you need to move that wood pile. But you could say, hey, do you notice I moved my wood pile? I went to this workshop and realized that that really makes my home prone to catching on fire, having firewood up against it. So I moved it. So you can kind of lead by example, but getting to know your neighbors, organizing workshops like this with your neighborhood, we're happy to lead those for your neighborhoods, is a really great way to think of ways to protect yourself, your home, and your neighbors. Okay, so we are almost out of time. I do want to touch very quickly on preparing to evacuate, because there are situations where you may have to evacuate. So thinking about the ready, set, go framework. So a lot of what we've been talking about is the ready. So thinking about what you would need to prepare to evacuate, what you would want to take with you. And many times, you know, these things aren't what's valuable to you might not be have monetary value, but it might be really important to you. So thinking about those things now before you're asked to evacuate and putting them in one place so that they're easy to collect is really important. So things like making sure your people, your pets are ready to go. So we have a wildfire announcement in the foothills in Boise. I go ahead and put together my to-go bag. I'm getting ready. It's by the door. It has all of our important stuff so that if an evacuation is called, I grab it and I go. So that's kind of the ready, set part. So ready is looking at cleaning up your yard, doing all the stuff we've been talking about. Set is, hey, there's a wildfire in the area. I'm going to make sure I've got all my important papers, prescriptions, the people I'm providing for my pets, personal needs, all sitting there by the door, or even better, in your car, ready to go. Maybe your car backed into your driveway so that you can drive right out. So yeah, getting ready are things like cleaning up your yard, being ready to go, getting that kit together, or your things that you would want to take if you have to evacuate in the middle of the night, for example. And then when you're asked to go, you got to go. I mean, there's no milling around. Every minute that you wait to get out of your neighborhood is a minute that might be too long. It's very important that you know your evacuation routes, you know where you're going to go, and if an evacuation is called, that you do not delay, because if you delay, there's a chance that you might not get out. So it's really important to cover these things, make sure that you're ready to go when it's asked to go, when you're asked to go. Some things to think about, again, in that set stage: preparing personal belongings, backing your car into your driveway so you can just pull right out if you have to. Putting the things in your car ready to go is a great idea. Turn on some inside and outside lights. You want your house to be visible to the firefighters. You want them to be able to see your house. Close your blinds. This is something I learned from one of your fire chiefs. Close your blinds, but make sure if you have thin curtains that are over your windows, that those are pulled open, because apparently even radiant heat coming through the glass can ignite really thin curtains. So keep those open, but close blinds. Turn off your AC, close all windows, vents, and doors. disconnect your automatic garage door opener. So, you know, there have been cases where you hear about tragedies where a whole family didn't make it out. They were stuck in their garage, and it's perhaps because their power went out and they didn't know how to open their garage door without the power. And so know how to open your garage door and make sure that it's disabled so that you can pull it open. And move flammable furniture into the center of your home. Do not turn on your sprinklers. The firefighters do not want you to turn on your sprinklers because it takes precious water pressure away from them, and they really need that water pressure. So keep your sprinklers turned off, disconnect your water hose, and when you're set to go, get out. Keep your house unlocked. So firefighters are asking you to keep your house unlocked so that they need to go in and put out a fire, they can. Get out immediately and don't turn on your sprinklers. Okay, so that's the evacuation. And to wrap up in the last 2 minutes that we have, I encourage you to take the next 5 to 10 minutes after this workshop is done to fill out this table. Because if you want to get stuff done, you got to have a plan. And you've already looked at your yard, you've got a sense of what you need to do, you've already made somewhat of a list. This table, we sent it to you in, okay, so, yeah, sorry, I'm distracted by the chat. So I sent this to you in an email. I'm going to give you a link to it in just a moment. But I would just do the easy stuff first. I mean, like, maybe the first thing on your task list is to make a task list. That's one of my favorite things to do. Then you can scratch something off right away and feel accomplished. When will you do this? Right now. How much is it going to cost? Nothing. How will it protect my family? I'm making a plan. What benefit is there in addition to reducing your risk or protecting yourself? Because a lot of these things that you do around your home have co-benefits, have things that maybe it just makes your yard look nicer. So recognizing those, I think, is an additional motivation to getting things done. So I would start with the easiest, cheapest things that you can do and set when you're going to do it. Maybe this weekend you can go clean off your roof. Maybe next week you'll tackle the underside of that deck, because right now it just feels a bit intimidating. Maybe in 3 years you got to plan out to replace your roof. You know that it has to be replaced. It's not ready to be replaced yet. You're just not there yet. Plan it out. That's fine. You don't have to do this all at once. In fact, it's better if you start just making steps along the way. So we think about preparedness as a ladder of preparedness, that every step you take up that rung, every little thing that you do to protect yourself, your home, your family, makes you that much more ready, that much more prepared for anything that comes your way. Earthquakes, wildfire, flooding, severe storms, power outages, you name it, right? So a lot of the things that you do here apply to those other hazards as well. So with that, let me share this with you. And if you have any questions, I'm going to stick around. And I think Max and Myra are going to stick around as well. Beth, thank you so much. You're a wealth of knowledge. I appreciate your comments during the workshop and in the chat. And every location is a little bit different. And so if in LA they ask you to keep your homes locked, there's probably a reason for that. Your Ventura County firefighter suggested to keep your houses unlocked. So maybe check with your fire department on what their local recommendations are. And let me pull up this table for you. So here's the link to the table. And I will be sending you an email as well, probably tomorrow, because it's getting kind of late here, with all of the materials that we covered. So you'll have the PowerPoint that I just presented. You'll have the goal setting table. I have some additional materials for you, like making a plan with your family, or important documents you might want to think of. We put together a one-pager on important documents. I'll share all of that with you. I'm also going to share that post-workshop questionnaire, because truly your feedback is so important to us. We want to know, was this effective? How can we make our materials better, our education materials better? Exactly, and so on and so forth. And please feel free to reach out to me with questions. And if I don't have the answer, I assure you, I will find the person that does. So thank you all so much for your time tonight. And I will stick around if you have questions. Feel free to unmute and we can chat.
Yeah, I have a question regarding sprinklers. I get that you don't want to have your community water on your private property, and preserving the water for firefighters is essential. Where do you stand, and what do you know about having stored water for your own sprinklers? I have 10,000 gallons with 10 rainbirds around our property, the Trout Club. We lost our home in the Painted Cave fire, and I'm not going to lose it again. And I'm just curious about the actual effectiveness of high-powered sprinklers with your own water.
Well, first of all, Gordon, I'm so sorry to hear that you lost a home in a wildfire. I can't imagine how traumatic that was. And it sounds like you've done a lot to protect your current home already with thinking about rainwater collection and whatnot. So I think if you're using your own water, there's no reason not to. If it's not taking water pressure away from the firefighters and you have that water reserve for your property, go ahead and use it. In terms of effectiveness, I don't know, Max, do you have any data on how effective it is to use sprinklers?
Yeah, essentially, the tricky thing to think about when using sprinklers is that it's difficult to time it correctly. So in a perfect situation, you're out the door when you get the evacuation order. However, if you turn the sprinklers on and then head out and they're watering down your roof in your house, that's fantastic. But the fire might not actually arrive for another couple of hours, in which case maybe the water's all gone by then. In your situation where it's your water and you've accumulated it for that purpose, I would still highly recommend utilizing it. And there are some products that exist that can work off of heat fuses and whatnot, so that way they only activate once it's hot enough, or in a case of an emergency. But I think with regards to efficacy, the reason is because it's hard to time it correctly.
Yeah, I have a remote switch up on my phone and 4 cameras on my property. So if I'm away from the home, I will be able to see what's going on north, south, east, and west, and I can hit the Lutron switch at the right time. But you're absolutely correct. It's like, don't fire till you see the white of their eyes, and that's kind of where I'm at on that one. I appreciate that.
Of course.
Something that Jay Lopez, who from LA County Fire, who was my mentor, all those years ago, come to the conclusion really helps is actually wetting down, literally changing the humidity around your house, just the first 5 feet or so, in any Santa Ana condition. So it's just long before a fire event, just raise the humidity, just put moisture into the soil, and he has seen that can make a difference. And so that's something that we can all do pretty easily in this land of scarce water, but trying to balance, you never know when the fire is going to come. So that's a technique that he has started using. During the Woolsey fire, the Calamigos Ranch was really saved by their own water and their nozzles and guns. And literally what they did was they were able to change the environment around their structures. So there's a lot to be said for it. Gordon, as long as you're using both the really huge nozzles, little rainbirds won't make a difference. The winds will just throw the water wherever it wants to blow it. And then the only other thing you got to really think about is how are you going to communicate when all the power's down and the communication lines are down? Are you really going to be able to communicate with your devices?
Yeah, I've got a generator that will take care of that. But
wow, Gordon, you're so prepared.
Yeah.
The gold star for the day.
Okay.
Thank you.
Renee, do you have a question?
I was just going to comment on the conversation, and yes, we also have a high power system that will run the sprinklers on several of our structures that we have. We've also given the fire guys, when they're here, the crews, the knowledge and how to use them, and also have the ability to fill their water tenders if needed. And so, yes, you have a really good point about generators. That's one of our concerns too. And we typically have a backup generator, but it's something it's required for us to be here to run. So we typically don't evacuate. Yeah. We only did that once during the Alamo fire, which was the same time frame as the Thomas fire.
Interesting.
This is this is Doug. I actually have a question. I'm looking out my window right now at a whole bunch of pretty close to dead ime on a hillside, and I think this is going to be a thing for us this year if fires do come through here. And I'm curious, you know, what kind of counsel you guys would give around, you know, just all this dead, you know, material because we're not able to water. That's sort of building up around our houses.
Yeah, I mean, especially if it's within 30 feet of your house, if you've got dead debris and material that's flammable. So you might want to consider removing it, replacing it with some low water plants. Like I would visit that garden. We have a Firewise garden here in Boise, and it's a great place to go and get some ideas.
Even with that ivy, all you need to do really is take out all of the dead material, get rid of it right now. And eventually when it rains, it will regenerate itself. The roots are in the ground and it will come back. You'll get rid of all of the dead ivy underneath it, which will be a great thing to do from a fire preparedness point of view for a couple of years. And it will make you sleep better at night knowing that it's not there.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, and the best leadership is actually you doing it. You know, you're concerned about what other people's gardens look like right now, and as we all are. And by you taking the initiative and doing some hard work, especially in the heat we have right now, you'll make a difference for yourself, but you'll also be a leader showing your neighbors that they can make a difference on their own property.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I think I think it's a great concern, and I think there's an pretty easy solution in this land. And you'll and understand that you can have your ivy will be back once it rains. It will come right back.
Great. Thank you, Beth.
Yeah, thank you both. Susan, you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. I have gutters next to a house that's next to a large stone pine that's in my neighbor's yard, and I get my gutters cleaned out twice a year, December and June. My question is, if you get gutter covers, you know, you're just going to have pine needles build up on the covers.
Yeah.
So they're expensive to put in. I have a 2-story house. I'm not doing it. I'm just wondering, what purpose? I mean, I'm open to suggestions, but I keep asking this question and I get a lot of, you know, they don't want to hear those kinds of questions.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's just a lot easier. You can just blow it off, right? You don't have to
On a
get up there and
2-story?
spit out. Well, I mean, how do you clean? How do you have a company come up there and clean them out?
I have a company that comes out twice a year, gets up on ladders,
Yeah.
blows it all out. I mean,
Right.
it's just, you know, I realize a 2-story house is much more complicated, but I'm wondering, for the expense of putting the gutter covers in, whether I'm gaining anything. If I keep them cleaned out as best I can twice a year, I don't let it build up.
Sure.
So
Anyway, my question. Thank you for this.
So go ahead, Max.
Susan, I think one of the things that I could foresee as being a benefit of getting them installed, you're right that they might sit right on top. During a wildfire, though, it's not going to necessarily become a receptive fuel bed for embers, right? The reason that the gutters, when they're full, become such a receptive fuel bed is that they're full. They hide in there and they're kind of protected from the wind, and then you have enough fuel to really put the roof and the decking and the eaves at risk as the gutters kind of carry fire next to your house. Also during a wildfire, presumably, I mean, especially given the wind conditions, they might clean themselves. It might be super windy.
True.
The pine needles that are sitting right on there, they're not going to have any protection from that gutter
Right.
inside. So it might just be cleaning it for you. I certainly
I'm
some might
hopeful.
get in there.
Yes.
Certainly some might still get in there, and there's nothing almost, anybody can do about that. But what you don't want is 3 solid inches,
Right.
of pine needles.
Yeah.
So you don't think twice a year is enough to clean them out?
Well, I would have to see your home and
How
look at the
built
situation.
up.
So if they're filling up every 3 months, then yeah, it might have to be 4 times a year.
Yeah, and it's pricey.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Yeah, I think that as long as the product is fine enough that the pine needles can't poke itself into it, that yes, they'll gather, they will sit on top of it, but when either the winds come with a fire event, they will be blown, they'll be dispersed off automatically, or in a rainstorm, the rainwater coming down your roof will shove them off.
Oh, okay.
And so as long as the mesh is pretty good, it's pretty fine. I actually just had the leaf filter guy out at my house literally today.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks to me like it's a pretty good product. I wasn't willing to do the Home Depot, Costco products. They also have some fine product. But he said that Cal Fire is recommending their product now, and I told him to go talk to NFPA and the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety and get some real studies done to convince me that actually it's the best product. But it's from a design point of view, it felt like it was the best product that was right now.
Okay, good to know. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And any other questions? Comments? Concerns? Complaints? We'll take it all.
Brittany, you did a great job.
Thanks.
Yes.
I've attended a lot of these.
Yeah, it sounds like
A lot of these.
Yeah.
And I like the interactiveness.
Yeah, that's in this particular one, because getting out a piece of paper and drawing and being interactive is, I think, just a different approach. It doesn't mean it's a better approach than other types of things that you do, but I think that the more ways this information is presented, the better. And it's the same message. That's also what's really important, of course, is that you could go and listen to your firefighter give you a talk, and you can have a home hardening assessment, and you're going to get the same information. And just presenting it in different ways may just provide just different kinds of motivation.
Right.
But hopefully in this one, you recognize that you do have a lot of control over protecting your property. There's a lot you can do that is very effective, especially when thinking about ember intrusion. So
Absolutely.
hopefully you feel empowered and motivated to get out there this weekend with some gloves and clean some stuff up.
So one thing you didn't talk about, but this might just be because is the difference between wind-driven fires and vegetation-driven fires.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people listen to what goes on in sort of the pine forest kind of fires, which would be more probably your experience of a lot of these fires. Maybe not up in Boise, I'm not sure. But down here, because we are wind-driven fires, it is just about impossible to stop the fire. When the 101 freeway isn't a good enough fuel break,
Yeah.
that the most you can do is harden your home,
Yeah.
have the fire flow around it,
Yeah.
and not let the embers ignite it.
Exactly.
Because in a classic fuel-driven fire, like up in the Sierras or something. A 2-lane highway will take a crown fire and put it down on the road, back down to the ground. A
Yeah.
2-lane highway here does nothing.
Yeah.
And
I
so,
hear you. Yeah,
So-
I mean, and that's even here, we're concerned mostly about the windblown fires because those are the ones that spread fast. And those are the ones that ignite homes more because those embers igniting that flammable stuff around your house.
right, because around here, people will, like after the Boise fire, people were saying like, oh, if we need 200 feet, why don't we need 300 feet? It's like, no, we don't need 300 feet of clearing. That's not going to make a difference solving this problem.
Yeah, right.
And that bare, and we're finding now that bare land is not necessarily the best thing, that vegetation can play a role
Sure.
in actually trapping embers.
Mhm.
And and if it captures the embers far enough away from the house, then it might be sacrificed,
Mhm.
but not get into a big, huge fire.
Yeah,
Like oak trees don't,
Yeah.
they recover because they haven't burned hard.
yeah.
Expensive.
Ember catchers.
Ember catcher, exactly. So,
Brittany, I know that you're an hour ahead of us, and I know that you have a work day tomorrow. So if there aren't any other questions, I want to respect your time.
Sure. I'm yes and yes. I do. It is 8:18 here. So, but I'm happy to answer more questions if you have more questions.